Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the successful visit of the Prime Minister, the conclusion of the visit, what it means as far as for the economy of the country, what it means as far as the bilateral ties between bilateral ties between China and Pakistan is concerned. How will it translate for us in the coming future? All of those things today. We'll be talking about, of course, both the premiers and their discussion in terms of what the future of Pakistan and China relations will look like. All of those things today on Perspective. Let's start off with Javed Siddique, who's a senior journalist. Thank you so much for being with us today. Javed, like I said, there's a lot that was on the agenda as far as this visit was concerned. Yes. Certainly, it was, after COVID, this was one of those two visits that was, of course, being looked at very, minutely by a lot of countries all over the world. We have a relationship with China, all of those things. But overall, how do you see this visit in terms of what it can mean for economy of Pakistan?
I think this visit has come at a very, very critical time. Because Pakistan and China both are strategic friends and they call each other as iron brothers. But in the intervening period that you have mentioned, because of this COVID, yes, the high-level exchanges were limited. And this is the first, this is a very important visit of the Pakistan's Prime Minister to China to dispel the impression that there is some kind of slowdown on the CPEC, which is a game changer in this region. And the opposition parties in Pakistan, as well as some of the elements who are hostile to this CPEC project, they were propagating the idea that it has slowed down and there's a misunderstanding between Pakistan and China. And I think the visit of Prime Minister Imran Khan to China has dispelled all these all this propaganda and other kinds of accusations leveled against
in terms of CPEC. Of course, we have there have been issues that yes, have arisen from time to time. We even discussed it a few days ago as far as Gwadar is concerned, yes, the issues there, all of those things. Of course, they must have been discussed between the meetings of the two premiers, and I think perhaps that was also a crucial part of the agenda.
It was. And secondly, I think the emerging regional scenario in South Asia and elsewhere, it's very important. And Pakistan and China are keen to enhance their relations, not only in economics field, but in the field of strategy, in the field of defense and other areas. Both China and Pakistan are facing common challenges in so many fields. And I think the Prime Minister's visit has been able to reinforce the friendship that already exists between China and Pakistan. And I think all these items of agenda were discussed with the Chinese Prime Minister, as well as in his meeting with the President of China.
Right, let me come back to you. I have also with us Salman Shah, who's an advisor with the Punjab government. Thank you for joining us today. Salman Saab, as far as this visit is concerned, particularly as far as economy is concerned, in terms of what it can translate into, what are the potentials and what do you foresee after the visit, now that it's been concluded, what it can mean, what do you see as far as the pace of these projects, the MOUs signed, overall, how do you see it?
I think this was an extremely important visit because it also takes CPEC into phase 2, and phase 2 is more related to foreign investment by Chinese companies and joint ventures with Pakistani companies, and moving into areas like agriculture, manufacturing, and services sector. So this was extremely important that now the two governments have put their weight behind it. Their framework agreement has been signed. And now I think the investment can start. And this is something which is going to be a lot bigger than the phase 1, because phase 1 was building the infrastructure. Now, most of the infrastructure connectivity the Gwadar port and the power sector initiatives, they are more or less done. But now the multiplier has come in, and the multiplier is manufacturing, agriculture, and services, where lots of jobs will be created, lots of investment will come in, and the amazing thing is that it will not affect our financing of our current account deficit, because the financing will be non-debt, and that would be very, very viable for us. Moreover,
Right, let me.
all these projects which the corporate sector is going to put in are going to be not only for domestic consumption, but they are going to be for exports.
Okay.
And
Let
exports
me
will
let me
not
come back to
only.
you, Salman Sahab. I'll just come back to you. I also have with us Zamir Akram, who's a former ambassador. Zamir Sahab, as far as we've been talking to Salman Sahab as far as the economy side of things is concerned, as far as our cooperation with China in terms of in trade, investment, all of those things. But overall, as far as the regional situation is concerned, how do you think this is going to look to the world? How do you think it's going to be looked at internationally, in terms of our relationship with China, and also, of course, in terms of perhaps an emerging bloc, so to speak? How do you see that overall, considering, of course, Afghanistan also was on the agenda when the Prime Minister went? I mean, his visit, it was part of one of the key issues that he was going to discuss with the Chinese Premier. Ji.
Well, I think the joint statement issued by Pakistan and China underlines the political, or I would say the strategic spread of Pakistan-China relations. For me, the most important emphasis in this joint statement is that both sides have talked about the regional, and that the relations between the two countries contribute towards both regional and international stability.
Right.
And they describe the bilateral relationship as a strategic cooperative partnership, all-weather strategic cooperative partnership, which is a very comprehensive way of describing this relationship to the international community.
Right.
And it also states that both countries support each other's core interests. Now, in that, of course, our interests are regional vis-a-vis our neighbor India, but the Chinese interests are global. And in that sense, both Pakistan and China are talking about promoting multilateralism and a multipolar order, which is exactly what the Chinese, and for that matter, the Russians, would like to see in the international order emerging. In the more direct terms, you referred to Afghanistan. That's very
Yes.
important, that the two countries agreed on stability in Afghanistan, addressing the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. But for me, the more important aspect from a long-term perspective is the agreement that China should be included within the framework of CPEC and BRI that the Chinese are pursuing. And in the issue of regional connectivity as well, which is what Pakistan would like to see, not just in terms of CPEC, but in terms of using or through Afghanistan, connecting with the rest of Central Asia, and which is also an objective shared by the Chinese. So I think these are all extremely important aspects. And then finally, I also want to emphasize that it is absolutely critical the way in which the Chinese have spoken about. I mean, we have our position on Kashmir, which is well known. But the Chinese have taken a very clear stance in this joint statement, in which they have referred to the Kashmir dispute that should be resolved through the UN resolutions and bilateral agreements. And
of course,
importantly,
let me come back to you, Zamir Sahab. Of course, their position is very clear. They have been very unequivocal as far as their support of Pakistan on Kashmir is concerned. There's no doubt about that. You're very pertinent in raising that issue. And I'll come back to you. I want to talk more about that also, but let me go to Javed Sabji. Javed Sab, overall, let's talk about the investment side of things, because before also we see visits, we see a lot of MOUs happening, but the fact that they have to then translate into real FDI.
Action, yeah.
Is also going to be a task, and is a task for any government, not just this government. How do you see that, the potential of that, in terms of, of course, the Prime Minister took his team with him also, he has had his advisor on investment, he had, everyone who was with him was clearly, there was a clear agenda,
Exactly.
economy being foremost, it seems, on it.
I think the Chinese are well aware of the fact that Pakistan's economy is passing through a turbulent period.
Right,
And
okay.
the global economic situation itself is in big trouble, and Pakistan is also affected by that. But I think China is giving a helping hand to Pakistan to improve its economic lot.
Right.
And that could be done through investment, and the investment that has been promised by China through CPEC projects is of great importance to Pakistan. I think it can give an impetus to Pakistan's economic growth. It can also resolve the issues of energy, communication and networking and all these important issues. So I think China is helping us out in a big way. Gwadar was also slowing down. The projects there were slowing down, and I
In
think
terms of the security situation within
Yes.
Gwadar, that also has been a cause of concern.
Concern.
The Chinese
and
have. Ji.
when the Prime Minister was on his visit to China, suddenly we have seen a spur in the terrorist activity in Pakistan. And that is a message being given by hostile elements to Pakistan-China cooperation, that they can be spoilers. And I think Pakistan and China has redetermined their position vis-a-vis terrorism, and they have decided to fight it out jointly, and that's very important. So I think both China and Pakistan have resolved to ward off any threats that are being created for the CPEC, which is a game changer, not only for Pakistan but for the entire
You're
region.
saying that in terms of, this visit will strengthen that resolve, not to have
Exactly.
any kind
and
of.
I think China has once again promised and assured Pakistan that it is going to be with Pakistan on all important fronts
Right, let
of
me-
security and economy.
Right, let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Salman Sabji. Salman Sab, as far as one window operation is concerned, so to speak, we have seen, I don't think it would be wrong to say that as far as the ease of doing business is concerned, that is an issue and has been an issue for a while. Of course, we've seen the government recently take steps in that direction. But do you think that the reassurance to the investors, potential investors in China, to that regard, those were also on the agenda? And do you think that, of course, steps have to be taken to make sure that we do get that kind of investment, and then it is easier for the businesses wanting to invest in Pakistan?
Look, I think we should not forget that China is currently the world leader in foreign investment, and they are investing not only in East Asia, they are investing in Africa and Latin America, even in Europe. So Chinese have a huge economy. It's now probably the biggest economy in the world. They have the financial system, which is as big as the Western financial system, and they have the resources to really deliver the goods. So this framework agreement with China makes everything very clear and transparent, which means that your foreign investment can not only come into your special economic zones, they can also be other areas where they can invest. For example, one of the companies, Chinese companies, is setting up its own special economic zone in Lahore. And so it has opened up a big opening for Chinese investment all over the country. So
Okay.
the Chinese investors and entrepreneurs and companies They will go to all the places where it makes sense for them and for their own profitability, and they will be able to make use of the logistics. They will be able to get the labor in Pakistan, and they will bring in the technology and know-how to transform Pakistan. Will almost become a mini China in terms of manufacturing and agriculture. So I think this is really a game changer, and there is no looking back. Uh, the last phase, the investments were around $50 billion. In this phase, it could be 3 to 4 times more than that. And
And
this
the
will
ease of
now
doing business,
continue.
are we going to be taking measures as far as, even other than this economic zone in Lahore that you're talking about, of course, to facilitate them, because that was also part of the agenda to reassure the investors in China.
Yes, I think as soon as these Chinese companies start to put in their roots over here, things will even get better because we will understand them, they will understand us, and the entire hierarchy in Pakistan, right from the prime minister down to all the government entities, they have been tasked to facilitate the Chinese investment, and in that respect, to facilitate all investments coming into Pakistan. So
Do
I
you think
think
that,
China
before
is
I go to
also at the
Zamir
cutting
Saab,
edge of
okay, let me
globalization,
go to Zamir Saab.
and
I'll come back to you.
that
Ji,
context, uh,
Zamir Saab, overall, as far as, at this time, the regional situation is concerned, one of the things that Javed Saab here in the studio, he's been talking about, is that while this visit was happening, we've seen a surge in terrorist attacks within Pakistan also, so as to sabotage our relationship with China, our relationship, our investment opportunities, all of those things. Do you think that, of course, I mean, we're ready to deal with any, of course, we're ready to deal with any threat that may emerge, or any of these, measures that are being taken to sabotage this relationship. But overall, in terms of India, in terms of Afghanistan at this time, Afghanistan being on the agenda, on the foremost part of the agenda of the Prime Minister, overall, can you tell us a little bit about the situation now that the visit has concluded also, and of course we hope to see a lot of investment flowing in, pursuing that.
Well, before you interrupted me, I was trying to make a very important point, which adds to what you asked me, and that is that in the
I
joint.
actually have to go to everyone, so I'm sorry if you were interrupted, but please go on.
Yes, the point I was trying to make at that time when I was talking about the joint statement and the reference to Kashmir in the joint statement is that China has clearly opposed any unilateral actions in Kashmir, and that obviously means the Indian actions of August 2019. That underscores the question that you're asking: is
Okay.
India's policy towards Pakistan and China cooperation? And that's very clear from the recent incident, the upsurge of terrorist activity that we are seeing in Balochistan and in KP and also in Islamabad and Lahore, is the use of terrorists that are being sponsored by the Indians to undermine the Pakistan-China relationship, to undermine CPEC, and to create a situation of instability within Pakistan. And that, unfortunately, has not invited the kind of criticism and opprobrium that we usually see from the US and from other Western countries about terrorist activities, for instance, in India itself, and the accusations that are leveled against Pakistan. Clearly, in this case, it is the Indians that are responsible for creating these kind of terrorist or sponsoring these kind of terrorist activities in Pakistan, and they are aimed against us, they are aimed against China, and they're aimed against the stabilization of the economic situation in Pakistan. So I think for all these reasons, we need to put up our guard, we need to take extreme action to ensure that territory of Afghanistan is not used for this kind of terrorism that we have been witnessing in the recent past.
So, Mirza, we saw the recent visit not very long ago of Mueed Yusuf to Afghanistan. And one of the main agendas during that visit, of course, was to communicate to the Afghan Taliban government there that Pakistan will not, take kindly, we will not put up to any kind of terrorism that emanates from there. Do you think that this, of course, one hopes that that visit will translate, but as far as you're talking about the US or other, the Western countries taking a stance on this, do you think considering their own relationship, their own geostrategic interests with India and, of the region generally, they will take a, they will talk about this, they will take a stand on this kind of terrorism that's emanating, that may emanate also?
In my view, the years in which the U.S. was present and the Indians were very close to the Americans, and the Indians and Americans were working very closely with the previous Afghan government. They had set up these kind of structures for terrorist activities against Pakistan. And
Right.
if the U.S. was not supporting it, it was certainly looking the other way. Now, with the Afghan government, the previous government having been replaced by the Taliban, who are under a lot of tremendous pressure, and the fact is that the Taliban simply do not have the capacity to control the areas, all the areas of Afghanistan, and those areas that are in proximity to Pakistan's borders are wide open spaces that are being used by terrorist elements. And I wouldn't be surprised if Indian intelligence is also operational in these areas close to our borders, and they are operating from there. I'm not blaming the Taliban. I'm simply saying that the Taliban do not have the capacity to deal with this kind of security environment on their own soil. So we need to work more closely with the Taliban. And for that matter, let me also bring in the Chinese, because the Chinese are extremely concerned about the Uyghurs who are also operating from Afghanistan, or Russians who are, and the Iranians who are also concerned about ISIS, which is operating from Afghanistan. And all these terrorist organizations are working in cahoots with each other. They are collaborating with each other. The TTP, the Baloch Liberation Army, the Uyghur movement, the Uyghurs terrorists, and the ISIS, they have a nexus, and that nexus can be traced back, at least in my view, to New Delhi.
Okay. Let me come back to you, Javed Sahab. Before I go to you, I'm going to go to Salman Sahab with this. Ji, Salman Sahab, do you agree as far as what Zamir Sahab is saying in terms of, whether we can actually, whether it's about the sincerity of the Taliban government or whether they are unable to control elements within Afghanistan at this time, that is something that really needs to be, Pakistan of course needs to clamp down, make more efforts to control that kind of terrorism. We have been consistently doing that also, but if we want any kind of real investment to come, we need to make sure that the security situation actually is completely flawless, right?
Yes, I think Afghanistan, the Taliban government is hardly 6 months old. They are having lots of issues, and it is quite expected that they would have these issues, because they are not only been out of government for 20 years, but they also are facing a very big humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, and they have to manage that as well as ensure that they have full security control in the country. But I have no doubt in my mind that Afghanistan is part of the positive things going forward. The geoeconomics of this area will take over. And I think all the countries which are neighbors of Afghanistan want Afghanistan to have a peaceful future, and they are going to ensure that the terrorism in Afghanistan is stamped out, and they will assist the government in Afghanistan to do that, because Afghanistan is going to link most of these countries. So whether it is CPEC or whether it's Iranian connectivity into Central Asia, or Turkmenistan trying to bring gas to Pakistan, or Uzbekistan trying to get to the ocean and the seaports. all of that depends on Afghanistan, and Afghanistan itself has gone through 40 years of almost strife, and now they are ready for it. So I think that even though it seems that suddenly everything is flaring up, with the passage of time, I think this will all settle down, come down, and we really are beginning to see the future of Central Asian, Western Asian CPEC kind of a coordinated economic bloc, which will probably be a free trade area and which will be, I think, open for tourism, trade, movement of people, exchange of people, students, and all that kind of thing. Something
Right.
similar
Okay. Let
to
me.
what happened when Vietnam War ended and ASEAN was formed, and ASEAN today is a super economic bloc. And I see that in the next 30, 40 years, the same thing will happen in West Asia, and Afghanistan is the key to that.
Right, let me come back to you. Javed Saab, do you agree? You think that the role that Salman Shah is also talking about, also Zamir Saab has also mentioned that as far as the pivotal role that will need to be played through Afghanistan for there to be the kind of investment we want to see, the kind of prosperity we want to see come in because of the Pakistan-Chinese efforts is crucial to any kind of real FDI flowing into Pakistan.
Exactly. I think Pakistan also understands that unless this terrorism is completely weeded out from Pakistan sides and from Afghanistan as well, because Pakistan has been asking, has been requesting the Afghan leadership, the current Afghan leadership, the Taliban government, that they should not allow their land to be used against Pakistan by terrorists. But unfortunately, the interim Taliban government has not been able to carry out the promises that it had made to Pakistan. And recently, our security advisor was in Afghanistan to talk about these issues. And from time to time, I think through various channels, Pakistan has been conveying its concern to the Taliban government that they should take stern action against those people, those elements who are trying to who are trying
to sabotage any of these
sabotage.
efforts,
And,
right.
and also the TTP, which is very active in Pakistan, and probably in these recent times, most of the terrorist activities were carried out by TTP. And they are there, and I think threat alerts have been issued by our security agencies in almost all cities of Pakistan. They could be active. And Pakistan and TTP are carrying out negotiations through this interim Afghan government, but unfortunately, that has not seen any positive result. And I think Pakistan is much concerned, so is China. And I think the entire region, the regional countries, the neighboring countries of Afghanistan want Afghanistan to be peaceful and stable, and a country which should play a role in connecting all the regional countries so that an economic activity is revived in this region. For such a long period of time, this area suffered because of the wars in Afghanistan.
Right, let me come back to you. Salman Saab, as far as our economy is concerned, as far as as far as what we hope to get out of this trip, this visit of the Prime Minister to China is concerned, overall, as far as the hurdles are concerned, do you think that we are going to be working, Pakistan is going to be working with the Chinese on those? Some of the areas you anticipate in which, we are looking forward to getting that kind of investment, agriculture also being one of them. But other than that, what are some of the areas you anticipate the Chinese are really going to be interested in as far as coming into Pakistan is concerned?
I think one of the things is that as Chinese investors see that investing in Pakistan makes a lot of profits for them, and it reduces their costs because the wage rate in Pakistan is about 1/10 of what they would get in China. I think that is the real key. And right now, the Chinese are not very familiar in how to work in business to business relationships in Pakistan, but they learn very quickly. Similarly, Pakistanis also don't know much about the capacity of China to invest over here. Who are the best companies? Which companies should be targeted? Because we have not yet done any road shows in China because of the COVID. As you can see, even the Olympics are being played almost in a bubble. So China is very, very serious about the COVID pandemic. And I think as things get a bit better in opening up, there will be a lot of exchanges from business to business exchanges. And once these happen, they'll make their own networks. Then the two
But Salman
governments
Saab,
will just have to.
as far as CPEC is concerned, let me interject. As far as CPEC is concerned, there is, it's been what, some 8 years now. How is this going to be? How are we different now at this time, at this juncture in time, than we were, let's say, 5 years ago or 6 years ago? Because of course, we've also been talking from time to time about the hurdles, about the issues that have been faced within CPEC, within the framework of what was anticipated and what actually happened.
Yeah, I think in terms of CPEC, those projects were more related to infrastructure, as I said, and which meant that every project had to be on its own, and we were monitoring that. And we saw that in some of the projects, there were delays, like the ML1. If you can look at ML1, I think that it's an outstanding project which will link Peshawar to Karachi through and maybe to Gwadar. And that is critical for modernizing the logistics in Pakistan. Similarly, the motorways have been finished, and they have contributed to mobility of internal mobility in Pakistan. But all of these projects had their own special issues which have been sorted out. But I
You
think
think that
once
you
business to
anticipate
business,
an increase in pace now?
definitely, I think, because of Corona, there has been a slowdown. I don't think that there was a deliberate slowdown in terms of strategically Pakistan or China slowed it down. Yes, there were issues on the ground, and that happens all the time. But I think that all these issues, that you have a fast track, one window operation now, which can sort it out. And I think that as we understand each other, things will now start to get much better. Uh,
Right. Okay.
Furthermore, there are lots of things which you have not even envisioned yet, and those will happen. I mean, the Pakistani students who flock to American and European universities will now go to China, and lots of the excellent institutions will open up in Pakistan. Because if in the agreement you saw that the special technology zones were also mentioned, which means that IT and computer technology and artificial intelligence, these are the areas in which China is a superpower. And I think we have these parks in Islamabad, Lahore, other places where the Chinese artificial intelligence industry can come and really do very good business because
Right. Let
Pakistani
me come back to
manpower
you. Ji,
is
Zamir Sab, overall, as far as this visit is concerned, your views on the fact that Pakistan and China at this time, our relationship, Russia, the stance that we've seen Russia take as far as Afghanistan is concerned, China and Pakistan and the West, the aftermath of the Americans leaving Afghanistan now. I know that you talked at some length about overall the situation in Afghanistan, the terrorism emanating from there. But in terms of recognition in Afghanistan, in terms of dealing with the humanitarian crisis there, the Prime Minister has pleaded the cause of the Afghan people all over the world. He's talked about it relentlessly, and he's tried for the world to engage with Afghanistan on that. Do you think China and their engagement can make a potential difference to that?
Yes, certainly. The sooner that we are able, together with China and other regional powers like Russia and Iran and the Central Asian republics, to help Afghanistan stabilize and overcome the humanitarian crisis, I think it will enable the Taliban government to take the kind of measures that the international community has asked them to take in terms of, say, for instance, women's rights or human rights, inclusive government, all those other kind of things that they are asking them to do. But I think at the moment, the Taliban have their hands full with this humanitarian crisis, and which has been made more acute by the U.S. and Western countries freezing Afghanistan's reserves, and also the assistance that was in the pipeline for Afghanistan. Now, with the United Nations Secretary General calling for a international fund or for international community to contribute towards the humanitarian crisis, to mitigate the humanitarian crisis, hopefully we will move in that direction. But implicitly, de facto, I think everyone recognizes the Taliban as the operational government of Afghanistan with whom we all have to deal with. So I think that eventually, yes, the recognition, the de jure recognition will come, but everyone, I think, has, that they were in Norway recently as well. So the de facto recognition is very much there, and the international community is working with the Taliban. What is important from the point of view of the broader question that you asked me is the ability of the Afghan government, the Taliban government, to first and foremost address the most important issues of its neighbors, and that relates to terrorism. The Chinese, as I said before, the Chinese, Pakistan, the Russians, the Iranians, we are all concerned about this. And I don't blame the Taliban. All I'm saying is that they do not have the capacity at the moment to deal with it, and that it's a two-way street. We can help them deal with it, and we can empower them, we can enable them to be able to deal with it. And I think that after the NSA's visit to Afghanistan, what we have heard from the Taliban is that they are ready to cooperate with us to do that. More broadly, I think that when we are talking about implementation of CPEC and the broader economic agenda, we have to first and foremost deal with our own problem of terrorism within Pakistan, because as I said before, it's very essential to give the right kind of confidence to the Chinese, to the Chinese workers and experts who are in Pakistan. We don't want to see the kind of repeat of the kind of attacks that have taken place in Gwadar and elsewhere. So we have
even
to deal
now,
with
if you look at Gwadar overall, the way that the Chinese move there is certainly, security with so much security. There has to be an infusion of confidence, even as far as Chinese are concerned, for them to be able to come here and for them to be able to, work here, invest here, do business here. So, of course, security is an integral part of all of that. Let me go to Javed Saab. Javed Saab, you've been listening to Zamir Saab as far as the overall situation is concerned. Do you agree? You think it's more about the capacity as far as the Afghan Taliban government is concerned? Because even within the Afghan government, and I think we've talked about this before, there is not really, one stance or one voice.
Yeah.
They themselves are divided in the way that they look at this.
The current Afghan government, which is the interim Taliban government, is fighting on so many fronts. The foremost is the economic front, where the humanitarian crisis is brewing up there.
Right.
And the world is watching, and they are not doing much to help out the interim government to overcome this humanitarian crisis. Pakistan has been doing a lot.
Right.
And whatever is there in the capacity of Pakistan, Pakistan has helped Afghanistan to become stable economically. But also Pakistan has made other efforts. Pakistan has been able to convene the OIC Foreign Ministers Conference. And from that platform, Pakistan has requested and urged the Islamic countries to come forward and help the interim Afghan government so that the humanitarian crisis could be averted. But at the same time, I think the United States and the Western world has also to come forward and help this government stabilize so that it is able to stem out the sources of terrorism in Afghanistan, all those roots which are basically creating terrorism and giving platforms to these terrorists in Afghanistan, they have to be rooted out. And that could happen only when the US and the Western world particularly comes forward and helps the interim Afghan government of Taliban's.
Right. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for being with us, Javed Siddique Saab. Thank you for joining us, Salman Shah Saab. Thank you for being with us, Zamir Akram Saab. Thank you for being with us today. As far as the issue, as far as this visit is concerned, certainly, as Pakistanis are hopeful. And they hope that a lot of investment opportunities will come from China. Of course, bilateral ties between Pakistan and China, which have always been strong, have further been strengthened. Issues relating to CPEC, have been ironed out, and we hope that furthering on those initiatives, there will be actually, FDI flowing from China. There will be businesses that will have that kind of confidence to come and, actually be housed in Pakistan, all of those things. And one hopes that the government will be able to achieve the kind of targets that it has set from, this visit of the Premier to China. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.